Welcome back to Inner Mastery, where you're learning the secrets within you so life can start to build you up rather than break you down. In today's episode, this is a book club edition, so we are reading Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, and this is chapter 2, the second half of chapter 2, starting with The Lost Ring. And this is really a deep dive and an exploration into how the ego is getting attached to things, getting its sense of self and identity and worth through having more, through constantly needing more, and then realizing most people at the end of their life that's not even getting you towards the truth. In fact, it's distracting from the truth. And so the sooner you realize that nothing out there is ever going to be able to make you feel whole, the sooner you start looking in a different place, which is within you. So if you have not already, if you're listening to this on one of the podcasting platforms, please give this a 5-star review. If you're listening on YouTube, I would love it if you could like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications. If you want to be part of this community, there is a Telegram group. It's listed in the description, and I hope to see you on the other side. You can always join us live at 12 p.m. That's noon Eastern Standard Time every Monday. Well, hey there, Danielle Matthews here. I am coming to you live from Florida, and today is Monday, which means it's book club day. So we are in the midst of reading Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth, which is a very powerful, very deep book. We are splitting the chapters in half because there's a lot of depth to each and every one of them. So this week we're on chapter 2, the current state of humanity, and we're actually in the second half of the chapter. So we did up to last time the Lost Ring. So today we're going to start with the Lost Ring and go forward to the end. If you're joining me live on book club, let me know when you get here. Hey Charlotte, good to see you. Hi Kevin. And if you're catching the replay, let me know that you're catching the replay. I know some of you can't make it here. Just so you know, we're live every Monday at noon Eastern Time. And if you're new to my content, I help people on a healing journey, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and part of book club is that spiritual growth and getting our mental and emotional strength right, getting aligned with really the reason your soul is here. And the books that I choose are usually deeper books, so they really get to the core of everything. And all right, I think what we'll do is we'll just dive in. I have like notes I wrote down. I got stuff underlined. I just had a million thoughts as I was reading this chapter. So we're going to go through it as best we can. And hey, Jane, it's good to see you. I'm glad that you're joining us live. And so the Lost Ring, right, this kind of this section of the book starts off talking about literally a ring that a woman, either misplaced or she believes someone stole it. And this woman was someone that Eckhart Tolle was going to visit. And what'd you say, Kevin? This book has been so helpful. I find his books heavy and sometimes hard to digest. Yeah, they are. We could probably spend an entire book club on like one sentence that he says. But hopefully I'm going to try and like weave this in to make it make sense, because it's not just like it's the knowledge, yes, but it's also the applied knowledge of, well, what does this mean for you guys? So talking about this ring, right? The woman that was sharing with him, he was going to visit her. She was basically terminally ill, has cancer. Her body's riddled with cancer. And she is blaming the woman that's coming to take care of her for stealing the ring. And, of course, Eckhart Tolle, right, he's not emotionally attached to this. He can see from a bigger perspective, like, well, why does this matter? Like, you're about to pass away. Who cares about the ring? You're about to have to give it up anyway. And yeah, Jane, you're not the only one that finds Eckhart Tolle's work heavy. It's like really heavy. It's powerful work. But he says the quickness of her response and the anger and defensiveness in her voice when he says, why are you upset? And he says that showed him that she had not yet become present enough to look within and disentangle her reaction from the event and observe them. Right? Put a 1 in the chat if you have something has happened and you just immediately go into some reaction later to find out like, oh, you made a bad assumption, or like, oh, well, had you known that now, in hindsight, you wouldn't have reacted that way. Anyone? I know, Jane, yes, I know there's certainly times that I've done that when I'm like, oh, okay. You just don't know. And so he was watching her have this reaction. And sometimes it's easier for us to see in other people. We're like, oh, they're getting angry for no reason. Or we can look at the ring, right, example, and we can say, like, well, this is silly. Like, she's going to pass away in a matter of days or weeks. Like, who cares? The ring's going to be left behind. You can't take it with you, right? You can't take it with you. But he said her anger and defensiveness was a sign that her ego was still speaking through her. And the whole point of this chapter is to find where the ego is taking over, where this aspect of you that isn't you is dominating. Remember, we talked about, I used last week my water bottle. Today I have a glass. But same thing, right? It's this idea that there are contents in our container, right? This reaction about the ring and all of this. These are contents in the container, but you yourself are the container. What he was saying was she was so identified with the contents, with the ring, that she was forgetting who she truly was. And so it was causing her to have this reaction. Hey, Vin, good to see you. And yeah, it's, Kevin says, I just made this mistake yesterday. Yeah, we do it. It happens to us. So, you've got to step back. And I thought Eckhart asked some really interesting questions. And so I'm just going to visit those questions for maybe those of you that don't have the book. I think that these are interesting questions to visit. He says to her, just see if you can answer these, not from your mind, but from like your heart. Number 1, do you realize that you will have to let go of the ring at some point, perhaps quite soon? And I would say to all of us, like, hey, none of us are going to be here forever. So, interesting. Second question, he says, is how much more time do you need before you will be ready to let go of it? Number 3, will you become less when you let go of it? This is interesting. And number 4, has who you are become diminished by the loss? I mean, if I were you, I would kind of keep these questions to the side, because when you get really angry and lit up about something, I think these are really powerful questions to kind of come back to and go, hang on a second. Is who I am diminished by what has just happened? No. Maybe a whole bunch of contents just left your container, but the truth of who you are is still intact. Doesn't change anything. You're still the light of consciousness. The most powerful thing. You had just temporarily identified with something that now has you like a mess and upset. Super interesting, right? He says, being must be felt. It cannot be thought. The ego doesn't know about it because thought is what it consists of. The ring was really in your head as a thought that you confused with the sense of I am. You thought I am, or a part of it was in the ring. Whatever the ego seeks and gets attached to are substitutes for the being that it cannot feel. You can value and care for things, but wherever you get attached to them, you will know it's the ego. I'm going to repeat one thing out of that. Whatever the ego seeks and gets attached to are a substitute for the being that it cannot feel. The mind cannot know, it can never comprehend the true essence of who it is. Right? It's like you are the ocean, you've come into form as a wave, and in order to navigate this world here, you're given an ego mind, right? The mind just has identified with things. It's the thing inside, it's like all the contents of your container, your ego identifies and says, that's me. Like the computer program of all the thoughts and societal things and language, all the things that make you you, your ego believes, oh, that's me. And so it just identifies with all the stuff in the container. It has no capacity. It is impossible for the ego to experience being the container. Do you understand? Because it's only identified from the contents. That's how it gets its existence. So it can never know. And so because it can never know, it tries to get its feeling of being okay and justify who it is through continuing to identify with the contents. And that's why it gets so upsetting when you attach to those things. Is this making sense? I hope it's making sense. This visual really helps me. It's like the truth of who I am versus, the ego mind getting tricked into thinking who it is. All right. So from here, it kind of went on, and I thought hands down best line, like the best line of this entire chapter was this. Page 41. Before we go on, Jane says, yes, but once you really know we're spirit, everything changes. Until then, we can't see beyond ego and separation. Yeah. And to know, you have to experience it. Your mind can't know. It's kind of interesting. I think this is like, it's a side topic, but, some people spiritually bypass. Like the ego gets the idea of, oh, well, I am the container and I can be all forgiving and whatever. And like people try to go to this space when really they haven't experienced it. The mind can't experience it. You You understand? Your being can, but your mind cannot. You have to move the mind away, the ego away in order to access it. So I get it. It's heavy. Might have lost some of you, but stay with it. I promise this will all come together and make sense. This line, I think this is what we could unpack for the rest of the time here. Life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. I think it's hands down probably just like, that is life. And, I'll read it again. Life will give you whatever experience is most helpful for the evolution of your consciousness. So how do you know what you need to learn or where you need to go, or that, the experience that is happening is the experience that you need? Well, because it's the experience that's in front of you at the moment. And in order for your consciousness to expand, you have to go through this. I know this hands down to be true. Like when I went through my traumatic brain injury and the car accident and everything after that, I know that experience transformed me and opened up my conscious awareness. It caused me to have to ask different questions. It caused me to look in places I hadn't looked before, right? I'd been so used to looking externally for answers that all of a sudden I had to go internal. And that was a very different direction to look for answers. I know some of you right now are dealing with physical health challenges also. And you're like, I'm freaking done with this. Why is this happening to me? It's happening because you're being asked to learn a lesson that is going to assist in your conscious level of awareness growing. And all of us are at different levels of conscious awareness. None of us are better than another one. It's just where our soul is in our own game of evolution and what lessons we're meant to be learning. Okay, so, put a 1 in the chat if this is helpful to you. To me, this is life. So whatever shows up, I just go, okay, whatever experience is in front of me is helping with my own evolution. And it's an evolution of consciousness. And I would put forth, right, like he said, the evolution that our species, humanity, is going through is not like, well, humans are going to grow wings and fly. Like, no, we're not going through that level of physical evolution. It is going to be an evolution of consciousness. It is going to be a shift in our consciousness. And if we start to use life as our teacher, as a guide, as showing us the lessons, it's like we're being tested daily by people, by interactions, by circumstances, by the political landscape, whatever. It's in front of us all for a reason. I would say the craziness of the world, right, is at the level that it is right now because humanity is being pushed. Are we going to wake up and realize that we're killing the planet, we're killing each other, we're hurting ourselves and doing all of this, right? Or are we going to continue on this trajectory that's going to lead to our extinction? Or are we going to wake up? Sometimes it's got to be rough. We got to look at right in the mirror and go, ooh, maybe it doesn't make sense to go there. Maybe we should get rid of, nuclear warheads. They just don't make sense, period. Right? But humanity is being faced with that. On a collective we are, and on an individual basis we are. All right? So, I just want to spend forever talking about that. but we'll move on. I think it's interesting, he kind of points out, I had never considered this. He says the ego isn't wrong or right. It's just being itself. Okay, and it's not bad and it's not good. The ego is just the ego. It's unconscious. It will never be able to be the container. It doesn't have the ability to reach that. And so it just is operating within the limited bounds that it knows. And it's not good and it's not bad. It just doesn't know better. Okay, it's completely unaware. I think of what Jesus said, right? Forgive them, Father, for they do not know. That's what he was getting at. They were so in their ego minds that they didn't realize that they were more, that there was more, that he was a representation of more, was trying to teach them how to access more. They were so limited. I was listening to this woman. I am forgetting her name completely. If it interests you, I will send it. Maybe I'll send it in the Telegram group. But she's an animal communicator. And I don't know, I stumbled on some video of the impact she made with I think it was a panther that was in captivity that was just giving a real hard time to people that were trying to care for it. And she was brought in as sort of this last lifeline. And within a day, things shifted. And I was like, wow, she truly has a gift. So I just went deep, like down a rabbit hole of watching her content, different interviews on different podcasts. And what blew me away, it became very clear to me that, yes, she has some gift. And if you think animal communication is crazy, I'm sorry, but you should watch this. It's just consciousness, right? And so people have abilities to connect with consciousness in different ways. And some people can do that. So anyway, and she claims we all could do it. Our ancestors did it, that's how they tracked. It's just fascinating, like what she shared. I'm so sorry that I don't remember her name. Anna, maybe, I think it's Anna. And anyway, so she said, like, they were looking at elephants, and elephants are obviously being just like decimated, their population. And she said that they tapped into basically elephant consciousness and asked, if there was anything that could be done to help. And do we need to write a certain letter or petition a certain company? What can we do to support you? And they came back and just said, there's nothing that can be done. We're already on this trajectory so far. There's no turning it back. There's no reversing it. Just hold us in the highest regard. Send appreciation for the beauty of our creation of elephants. And then she said, every time I tap into animals, oops, my internet connection is having issues. Uh-oh. Can you guys hear me? Am I there? Can you put a 2 in the chat if I'm with you? I'll give it a moment. Let's see. I'm going to end Instagram. Instagram peeps, it's going to be up on my Facebook, but I got to get better bandwidth. So, Kevin, meet me over there. Others, meet me over there. Okay, are you guys with me? Uh-oh, it feels delayed. Let's see. I fixed the internet. I'll give it a minute. Anybody still there? I feel like you are. It's showing me that you're viewing, so I'm going to keep rolling. You might just be a little delayed from where I am. So, okay, you're with me. Okay, I'm back. Okay, I turned off this, so we should be good. All right, so where was I in the story? So basically, the moral of this whole story was, she said that the animals were not mad at the humans. And she said they understand that it's our ego minds that have taken over our actions, that are causing us to work so unconsciously and to operate so unconsciously that we are literally killing off species. We are killing the planet. We are hurting the planet. And we're ultimately hurting ourselves in the process. But we're blinded that we don't even know because we're operating from a level of consciousness that is too low to understand. We're being unconscious. And I thought, whoa, they get it. They don't have ego minds. We do. And that's what he says here. The ego isn't wrong. It's just unconscious. And when you observe the ego in yourself, you are beginning to go beyond it. It's that simple. Don't take the ego too seriously. When you detect egoic behavior in yourself, just smile, right? And just ask yourself, how could humanity have been taken in by this for so long? Because for hundreds of years, thousands of years, we have been, right? It has just dominated. And it's just so unnecessary. So, all right, I'm glad that we're back. And hopefully that tangent was helpful for you guys to understand. But I thought it was so beautiful, that viewpoint. And I think it's huge. And it's in the same way, like, don't judge yourself. When you act in a way that it's really your ego reacting, like, don't judge yourself, catch it. More often you catch it and you bring it back and you bring it back and you bring it back, that pattern behavior doesn't become, like, the groove isn't as deep. The draw to that isn't as deep. You start getting drawn to just, coming back to the witness, coming back to being the container, not the contents. All right, and that's how you break this over time. So, man, we are like 2 pages in almost through this. So let's recap some stuff. So he talks about the illusion of ownership and this interesting thing in that, the closer that we get to death, The concept of ownership starts to be revealed as just meaningless, right? Because when you pass away, you realize that all of these things that we had in life that were, proof of who we were really aren't, right? You can't even take them with you. It's wild. And you start to realize that, really these things just obscured you from identifying with the truth of who you were. And so for all of us, I'd say, let's get to this realization before we're on our deathbeds, right? Let's find out that, we are more than all of these things and we don't need them. It's fine to have them, but it has nothing to do with who we are. It makes us no better or worse for having things in the external world. So that was an interesting thing. And then he says, the ego tends to equate having with being. I have, therefore I am, right? Because it gets its identification from the contents. If I have this, then I am better. And the more I have, the more I am. So the ego lives through comparison. How you are seen by others turns into how you see yourself. And how you are seen by others becomes a mirror that tells you that what you are like and who you are. The ego's sense of self-worth is in most cases bound up with the worth you have in the eyes of others. Isn't this interesting? How many of you care about what other people think? A lot of you do. Right? A lot of us do. Right? It's just there. When you catch it, you go, knock it off. But it's there. You need others to give you a sense of self. And if you live in a culture that to a large extent equates self-worth with how much and what you have, if you cannot look through this collective delusion, you will become condemned to chasing after things for the rest of your life in the vain hope of finding your worth and completion in your sense of self out there. And he says, it's a crazy game. Going out there to try to prove yourself. I mean, how many times is it like you get that thing and then it's like, oh yeah, but now I have to have this. It's like, it says you have to have this, you get that, and then the list like spontaneously just like has something new appear on it. I know many of you are in business, network marketing space, right? And it's so interesting, right? You hit a rank and it's like, oh, I've been working so hard to get there. I just hit bronze, yay. And then immediately it's like, yeah, but you need to get to silver. It's like, you're allowed to have like a yay for like 2 seconds. And then it's back, telling you that, no, you need something else. You got to achieve more. You got to achieve more. You got to achieve more, because it identifies only with more. The more I have, the more I am. So how do you get rid of this attachment to things? What he says is you don't even try. It's impossible to try to get rid of the attachment. Attachment to things will drop away by itself when you no longer seek to find yourself in them. When you stop seeking out there to validate who you are and become, feel better for, who you are through the things that you accumulate, the accolades, the acknowledgments, all the stuff. When you stop doing that and you start instead to just go within and start to connect in with your higher self and starting to just get enamored with the idea of quieting the mind and finding inner peace and connecting in with your intuition, that's when just automatically your attachment to stuff just goes away. All right, that's the way to it. So, cheers to all of us figuring out that path. I also thought it was interesting. He said, the ego's wanting for more. This statement of I don't have enough yet really is the ego saying, I am not enough. So is there just this, have you felt this constant gnawing that like, you're not enough. You're not enough. I have like, there's something to prove. There's something to show. Like our self-worth, like it's just not big, because we feel that there's something missing. Well, I got to do this thing. I got to have, this much money in the bank account. I got to have this kind of house. I have to have blah, 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 blah. It's fascinating when you step back and see it and go, wow, it is going to keep me on a constant hamster wheel because it's constantly feeling like it's not enough. High five me, 5 in the chat. Have you experienced this? Where your mind is just telling you that you're not enough, you're not enough, you're not enough. You need this, now you need this, now you got to do that, blah, 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 blah. It just keeps you going. I mean, it's pretty wild. It is pretty wild. But the wanting is what keeps the ego alive. And he says most of the time the ego has conflicting wants. I mean, it's just like, it's like amazing. As you learn more and more about the ego, you're like, yeah, this thing is crazy. Like all it wants is to want, but then it doesn't even know what it wants. It wants different things at different times. It may not even know what it wants, except that it doesn't want the present moment. And so unease and restlessness and boredom and anxiety and dissatisfaction are all a result of unfulfilled wanting. When you stop and go, well, what is it that I want? It doesn't even have an answer for you. Isn't that crazy? Wanting is structural, so no amount of content can provide lasting fulfillment as long as the mental structure remains in place. I'm going to read that again. Wanting is structural, so this is just how the ego is composed. It's the structural component, right? It identifies with all the contents, so the contents can change. But structurally speaking, the ego gets its identity through wanting more. And he says, so wanting is structural, so no amount of contents, nothing, you can never have enough. No amount of contents can provide a lasting fulfillment as long as the mental structure remains in place. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And, he goes on to say, thought forms like me, mine, more than, I want, I need, I must have, not enough, these all pertain not to content, but to structure. So when you find yourself having those thoughts, well, this is mine, or I'm better than, or I have to have this, that's the ego. So you can start to catch yourself. All right, you can start to catch yourself. Now, I thought it was really interesting. One of the things that is in our container most often is the body, right? We look in the mirror, we see it. You're looking at mine right now. Like, it's here often. And so we very easily get identified with the body, and we think, I am the body. We think, right, our gender becomes our identity, our physical appearance becomes part of our identity, if we are strong, if we are weak, if we are beautiful, if we are ugly, how we are in relation to one another. And our sense of self-worth starts to get bound up in our physical body, to the point that it can lead to things like anorexia and bulimia and, people that are identified with their good looks or their physical strength or their abilities. They experience a lot of suffering when those attributes begin to fade away and disappear in old age, because they will. Right, and I thought this was particularly interesting, especially for those of you that work in ASEA. You might have come across this, where you have somebody that's really sick, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have a solution. Like, the solution is helping hundreds of thousands of people. It's going to help you exactly where you need it. It works on the cellular level. It's a no-brainer. Can't hurt you. Can only help you. And they say no. And you're like, what is going on here? Maybe you have run into this. People become identified with their illness. Has anyone seen this? I can tell you that I did. So when I had my traumatic brain injury, like, my whole identity, everything that was in my cup got just poured out because I couldn't do anything. I was just in bed all day. And I was like, who am I? Right? And then I was like, well, I have a TBI, like, I'm a traumatic brain injury, whatever, that's me. And then as I started to get healthy, thank you, ASEA, as I started to get better, right, it was like, well, who am I now? Because all I knew was my brain injury. And it was like, okay, well, if that's now going away, and my life, like every minute of my life had been about my brain injury for many years. And people that are sick, this happens. Yeah, Jane, right? She noticed it when she burned out. It's like everything is about that. It's like, well, who am I without that illness? And as that started to get better and I started to get back in the world, it was like, yeah, like, who am I if I'm not this? And it really freaked me out. It was like my footing was a little unsure because I had become identified with that. My ego had. Oh, you're a TBI victim, right? Wild. So has anyone seen this in ASEA? Because I have seen it, where I have a solution for somebody and they say no. And I step back and I look at it and I'm like, wow, they're so identified with their illness. And if they didn't have that, they wouldn't know who they were. And it's unconscious. They don't realize they're consciously doing this. And maybe you haven't seen it because it does take a level of conscious awareness to see it. But now that I've said it, you're going to see it. I promise. All right. So one of the best things that you all can do as we kind of come to a close here is, realize that you are more than just this body and connect in with the aspect of you that is more. And he says body awareness can anchor you in the present moment, and it is also a doorway out of the prison of the ego. And for those of you that I've worked with personally, right, Yoga Nidra, for example, this is a tool that was designed thousands of years ago to help you disidentify from the body and be able to connect in with the truth of who you are and have direct experience of it. Not from the level of the mind, but from the level of your being. And it's profound. right? When you can actually experience life from that space, it's totally different. And that's when you know the truth of these words. You don't have to believe. It's not something that the mind has to conceive. You know it to be true because you've been there. When you can disidentify with the body, it's incredible. So becoming aware, anchoring into the energy that's in the body, so powerful. What did you say here, Charlotte? How does the want of spiritual education deal in relationship addiction? How does the want of spiritual education deal in relationship addiction? I'm not sure what you mean by relationship addiction, meaning like you have to be in a relationship. How does the want of spiritual education? You're going to have to clarify this. I'm not sure I fully understand your question. But spiritual education, right? If we're using what is being shown here and in all the books we've read, you'll start to use life and relationships specifically to help you reveal what's inside of you that's unfinished, to help with your spiritual evolution. Relationships are probably the best playground. They're like a little, talk about transformative pressure put on you in relationships to actually see what's within you and do the inner work. They create that. I'm not sure if that's what you're getting at, so maybe you can clarify. All right. So in kind of wrapping up, I'm going to have to just like breeze through the rest of this. Okay. I'd say, he talks about the peace that passes all understanding, that there are many accounts of people who've experienced the emerging of a new dimension of consciousness as a result of tragic loss at some point in their lives. And I think we've all been through some amount of loss, some difficulty. I think collectively humanity, right, through the pandemic was. And people are coming out of that shifting, right? You hear a lot of people saying like, oh, people are waking up, right? And that means different things for different people because their level of conscious awareness is at a different place. Okay. So there are many accounts, right, of like that shifting people, because a lot of times when your ego gets broken, it gets shattered, right? All the things you're identified with, gone. It causes you to experience something different. And you can feel like a sense of peace, even in all this chaotic time. And that is the piece of, being the container versus the contents. But he kind of gives a warning where he says, not everybody who experiences great loss experiences this awakening, because the disidentification from form that happens, right, is powerful. Some immediately create a strong, though mental image or thought form in which they see themselves as a victim, whether by circumstance, other people, an unjust fate, or a victim of God's anger or resentment, or they have self-pity. They strongly identify with that, and it immediately becomes their identification. And I want to point this out because people can collapse into victimhood, and then they're the victim, and that's it, and that is who they are. And their ego has now identified with that versus everything they had before. Now it's collapsed down. And what I want to point out is that the ego doesn't care how deeply unhappy it makes you. It just needs to identify with something. So it's fine identifying with resentment and anger and self-pity and being a victim. And so you have to catch it. You've got to be ready. Because it's a wicked space to be stuck. All right, we've probably seen people stuck there. So, geez, cutting these chapters in half really still isn't enough time. We're out of time. So we're gonna reconnect next week on chapter 3, the core of ego. We're gonna read, in my book, it's page 59 to 72. We're gonna end right where it says the ego is not personal. We'll end right before that. Okay. So let's see if Charlotte had anything to say here. ADIS, it is addiction, not personal. Well, any addiction is ego, right? It's just someone that is not really learning who they truly are and hasn't experienced it yet. And so when you can get people to have that direct experience, sometimes you can't even talk somebody into it. Their mind can't get there, but you do something like a yoga nidra and you get them to feel it, and they go, what is that? Right? And that can wake them up. You got to remember, every soul is on its own journey. So sometimes they have to go through an experience, and we have to watch people go through addiction, go through really difficult times, because that's the thing, right? Every experience in front of us is for our own conscious evolution. It's the thing that we need right now to wake us up to the next level of consciousness. And so sometimes we can't stop that for people. It's what they need. It's their own evolution, and they have to kind of move through it. So I hope that helps. I will connect with you all in Telegram. I hope you have a wonderful week. It's always good to be with you guys, and we'll talk soon. Lots of love.